Ladies and gentlemen, this session is about cultural barriers to communication. It's my pleasure, it's my honor to stay here. Thank you, UNESCO. Thank you, Alton Grizzly. Thank you, Caroline. And thank you, everybody, for your presence in this session. Welcome, everybody. At this moment, we have the presentations of my colleagues. We have 7 minutes for the presentation. It's very short time, but that's it. My presentation. Thank you. Right. Thank you. This is my presentation. Media and information literacy, no, and the methodology of cultural barriers to communication, CBC, and creativity, a comparative study with young people and teenagers in Brazil and Cuba. This is very important topic because the conflicts and multicultural conflicts, problems, obstacles are very present in many situations in the education, communication, marketing, and others. Show a comparative research, the objective is show a comparative research about the cultural barriers to communication, CBC, and creativity with young people and teenagers in Brazil and Cuba, and physical and digital educational systems. This is our group of research, cultural, creativity, innovation, communication, and marketing. The lines of our studies are cultural barriers to communication, creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, marketing and communication for project management, management of communication and digital marketing and distance education, personal internet marketing. The several points, the principal points of media literacy for us are here. The role of a skill related to critical thinking and creativity, and new technologies and media, but with ethic. But cultural barriers to communication, the definition is, as said, CDC, are a set of factors from a symbolic or concrete origin that extend beyond language difference and which cause damage communication between people of different countries, organizations, ethnicities, cultures, and values. Bon, a cultural change or a creative human needs. But in the present, we have inner and outside barriers, risks, challenges, but in the future, we have opportunities and new purpose. It's necessary a creative jump. But this is the model, the show the relationships between media literacy information and approach and methodology of 20 cultural barriers to communication. It's very important to see two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, diagnosis of CBC, 20 CBCs in our model, and the second phase is the structure or strategy of creativity. What is the research question? Our research question is, what are the CBC and the creativity potentials present in adolescents and young people in the educational ecosystems that occur in the process of teaching and learning in public and private schools in Brazil, in Cuba, and Cuba. Well, the methodology of culture of barrier to communication and creativity is this. In this research, we used the following tools: 2 questionnaires, 2 interviews, and 3 observations. Questionnaires answered this research. 30 public school students, 45 private school students in the east zone of São Paulo, Brazil, and 37 public school, students in Havana. But the main results is here. The principal modalities of cultural barriers to communication, the 20 present here. But the main results are ethnocentrism is more present in Cuba. Sensualism more present in Brazil, in Cuba too. Urban or rural barrier is more present in Brazil. Overvaluation for under-evaluation of age is more present in Brazil. Technological barriers is more present in Cuba, and different judicial positions are more present in Brazil. Bullying, very important barrier. Bullying is more present in Brazil. And the last one, language barriers is more present in Brazil. For the time, I go quickly. Comparative analysis of cultural barriers to communication present in schools in Brazil and Cuba is here. Between the two countries, including the private school in Brazil, a point of coincidence was the strong presence of cultural barriers to communication related to a valid or not valid the age in Brazil, in Cuba. This may be indicating the teachers in both countries do not value enough the views of the young people and adolescents. But other relevant results, the barrier of not to overvalue the age ranked first in the both country. The language barrier was second barrier in importance in both countries. In the autocratic communication style barrier ranked third in both countries. Well, the main result of creativity is here. The comparative analysis of creativity in the study school in Brazil and Cuba is here. In the school studies in Brazil, the scores, they have lower scores, was the problem solving. In Cuba, flexibility. This result is because the difference concerning cultures, stories, social regimes, education, policies, and present on and use of the technologies, the different in both countries. Okay? Final considerations. The diagnostics methodology of the 20 cultural barriers to communication and creativity provide to be a useful evaluation and metrics tool to diagnose the different profile of the adolescents and young people of each country. We have here a quick vision with 20 indicators or modalities of CDC. This is a map for the action. This is a map for the diagnosis and the action. It's really fast in the education, in the communication, and the marketing. That's all. Questions or reference, reference, that's here. Final question too. Which are the opportunities that those studies of the cultural barriers to communication and the creativity in the internet open for the students, teachers, educational managers, community, and new stakeholders of the smart cities and the society? And finally, my invitation for this meeting in Havana, Cuba, Cultural Communication, Marketing and Community in January for everybody. These topics are discussed in Havana too. This meeting is organized for the University of São Paulo and the University of Havana with the president, Professor Mitsuru Yanase. He is the coordinator of this event. Well, that's all, right? Thank you. At this moment, I invite to the speaker, Nabiha Islam, for your presentation, please.
Which one? It's this one. Yeah, I just changed it today. Oh, no. This one has to be, I think that's the one that I cut out. It's the bad ones. Yeah. This one is? Sorry. This is the good one. Yes, that's the one. That's the right one, yeah. And do you need a microphone? I've got one sec. Hello everyone, my name is Nabiha and I'm the founder of Invigorat. Invigorat is a development organisation dedicated to using the arts as a positive driver for change. The organisation has contributed to several arts projects responding to the rise in hate speech and radicalisation. Invigorat has used several case studies that have identified successful ways in which to engage in interfaith and intercultural dialogue using the creative arts and other non-formal methods of education. This includes the Migration Matters Festival, plays at the Bush Theatre, including Black Lives, Black Words, the British Council's Hijabi Monologues and the Believers Brothers, and the No Hate Speech movement. The first case study is the Migration Matters Festival in 2017. It takes place every year during Refugee Week in Sheffield and in Theatre Delhi in London. As a part of the wider festival, there is an open event in London, the At Home Festival, which invites work on the topic of displacement. The festival includes performances for refugees and by refugees, workshops for refugees and film screenings. Invigorat staged a short play which was immersive, exploring the refugee experience of assimilation into society. The play was developed through short interviews with former refugees. Racially motivated aggression was encountered by 8 out of 10 interviewees, especially when unable to communicate. The rest experienced some sort of hate speech, and several noted that despite not being Muslim, the assumption subjected them to Islamophobia as well as general xenophobia. Performances by groups such as Paper Smokers, which was performed as a mime act, highlighted the difficulties refugees faced when unable to communicate due to language barriers. The festival was not only presented, it not only presented migrant experiences, but explored reasons why extremism could be resulted through the ostracization of refugees. The success of the festival's aims to provide intercultural understanding and fight against hate crimes against refugees was documented through a survey carried out by Invigorat. Invigorat found that 8 out of 10 people believed that events such as these would help people to empathize with migrant experiences. 6 out of 10 believed that these events were more likely to reach audiences who were already sympathetic to the cause, but they did not rule out the possibility that curiosity could attract new audiences. The diversity of the audience was an indicator of the impact such a festival could have on communities. 70% were white, British or European, while 30% were from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. What made the festival's aims even more successful was its accessibility, since many of the events were free to attend, meaning it reached audiences at a grassroots level. New audiences who might not have otherwise attended were willing to open their minds to explore migrant experiences and tackle the reasons behind extremism and exploring the experience of Islamophobia. The next 3 slides will be case studies from the Bush Theatre in London. Another example of a successful performance-based activism was Black Lives, Black Words. In 2017, the Bush staged the US project started by Reginald Edmond and commissioned 4 new plays. Plays included the real-life story of Sandra Bland, who died as a result of police brutality. Through this, the artistic director, Madani Yunus, was able to highlight this brutality and the racial inequality faced by black people and the rise of the radical right. By presenting these stories, Yunus explored why such brutality took place and discussed ways in which to move forward in after-show discussions. The hijabi monologues. So, Tal Mama, the UK group that monitor hate crimes and hate speech against Muslims, has seen a significant rise in incidents of anti-Muslim hatred. In 2015, 56% of victims who were subjected to hate crimes were female and experienced this in person, and by 2016 there had been a 47% increase in these experiences. In response to the continuing rise in Islamophobia, the Bush staged the London premiere of the British Council's Hijabi Monologues. It first originated from the USA in 2006. The Bush had a 3-night run, and the theatre noted that around 70% of the audience were new audiences to the theatre, and that the demographics of the audience was varied. One audience member Invigorat spoke to stated that he and his wife rarely visited the theatre, but what attracted them to the performance was the curiosity to hear the unfiltered stories from real Muslim women as opposed to fiction. Through the play, audiences were allowed access to the everyday lives of Muslim women and were exposed to the reality of certain issues such as street harassment, which transcends religion. The play draws on common experiences and helps to bridge the gap between communities. Alongside the performances, workshops were held for women who were unsuccessful in their monologues, but it was to strengthen their voice. The Bush Theatre furthermore staged Jawad Alipur's The Believers Are But Brothers, an interactive stage play that used social media to spark debate amongst theatre goers. Through a WhatsApp group, audience members were able to communicate ideas with each other while remaining anonymous, having end-to-end encryption, thus highlighting the dangers of social media. The performance displays the manipulation that young adults can be drawn into through the use of such platforms where encryption protects those who incite hate speech and hate crimes. Websites such as 4chan.
Sorry.
Oh no, am I over by a lot? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realise.
Excuse me.
I thought it was brilliant. Okay, I'll just skip to the end. I mean, the No Hate Speech movement. The Council of Europe started the No Hate Speech movement in 2013. Invigorat worked alongside the Council and Euro-Mediterranean Resources Network to deliver human rights education with colleges and faith schools. The education was more effective in exploring hate speech since it encouraged young people to seek solutions. Through the No Hate Speech movement, the Council, along with partnership organisations, has been able to deliver valuable lessons to young people in order to understand their statutory rights. And my conclusion. So to conclude, Invigorat found that to tackle hate speech effectively, providing ways in which to present ideas creatively was effective in sparking empathy and understanding. Through festivals and theatrical performances which had an interactive element, audiences were able to fully engage with topics. Events such as the Migration Matters Festival present ideas much like Brecht did in his political plays, where audiences are able to dissect social concerns. This, alongside creative workshops, allowed audiences to engage in interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Furthermore, campaigns such as the No Hate Speech movement was successful because it used non-formal education, which is more accessible to youth groups, By implementing human rights education, the youth of today were empowered with the tools of advocacy.
Thank you.
Was that okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for your contribution. Well, I can invite Michael Saguada from Japan for...
Where is
What do you need?
the slide?
This one, yes?
This one. Okay.
I need the note.
Is it okay? When you want to present?
Just because I wanted to read the note.
Read the note.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when you will present, just press this, okay?
Okay.
7 minutes. 7 minutes.
Okay, I have to deal with that note. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Maiko Salvador. I'm from Japan. I teach English in Japan, but I have backgrounds in journalism and international politics. So today I would like to present my topic, which is how Japanese students can make a closer cultural dialogue with Chinese people in Tokyo through English and media information literacy education. So Tokyo is apparently a global city. We have over 30 million people living there, and we will host the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, and we will hope to attract world attention there. So we need to make the city creative and sustainable. So we need media information literacy. So because I studied about for this topic, I focus on the Japanese university student in Tokyo. So the characteristic of Japanese university student in Tokyo I found is the following. And there are many students who are not communicative enough when trying to speak with Chinese people there. But they use regularly the smartphones and social media outlets, but they don't use it. They don't use efficiently enough to communicate with them. But at the same time, this Japanese students learn English as a contact language in general with foreigners. In English education and media information literacy and social media, when we use social media outlets, traditionally speaking, in English education, we introduce media literacy as by using newspaper articles, and we didn't use much of social media outlets. So this is a new area. And so my research question was, why can't Japanese university students in Tokyo better improve their cross-cultural dialogue skills with Chinese people there? And my hypothesis was because Japanese university students didn't have a chance to learn media information literacy until they come to university level. Or maybe if they are not majoring in the specific field, maybe they will not have a chance to learn media information literacy at all. I would like to highlight 4 points in this topic. First part is that media information literacy is important to form Japanese public opinion about Chinese people and China. An opinion poll shows that about close to 95% of Japanese people form their public opinion about China based on their reading of Japanese mass media. In 1913, there was a territorial dispute, and I need to see the figure. I don't remember the figure, but over 90% of Japanese public had negative opinion about Chinese people and vice versa. And in 1918, this year, still the Japanese people still believe that territorial dispute was an essential part of the essential cause of this essential cause for them to have negative sentiment about Chinese people. And only close to 3.3% of people, Japanese people, form their public opinion about Chinese people based on their direct communication with Chinese people. So it's, their opinion is much based on the mass media. And there is more Chinese people in Tokyo. It's becoming increasing cultural diverse to Japanese traditional homogeneous culture. in Tokyo, there are an increasing number of tourists visiting Japan too. And now in Tokyo, over 1.25% of population is Chinese. So it's quite a change for Japanese culture. So there is a need for Japanese students for the young generation to have a desire to communicate with Chinese people. And because I'm an English teacher, and I think that English can be a communication, a contact language for Japanese people to communicate with Chinese people. Of course, it's important for Japanese to learn Chinese and Chinese to learn Japanese, but English can be a contact language. And so as a third point, how much time do I have? How much time do I have? How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes? So
2 minutes.
I have 2 points to make. Japanese university students use social media outlets to support social network and social space that already exist. So it's difficult to create new social spaces with the use of Twitter. That's a widely used platform for Japanese university students. And this is another platform for application that's called JapLine. It's for instant communication. But because we have a sense of us and them, it's difficult to create new social spaces for Japanese university students to have new contact and communication with Chinese people with the use of social media. So how can we educate a young generation university students in the classroom, for example, in English education? There are theoretical perspectives that we can introduce that media education, English education, media information literacy education play an important role to bridge the gap between Japanese and Chinese, and they can offer critical thinking skills and cognitive pedagogy. So in conclusion, critical thinking and cognitive pedagogy are key for English and media literacy education of Japanese university students in Tokyo. With a better use of smartphone and social media outlets, Japanese university students in Tokyo can learn to create new social spaces, so to better communicate cross-culturally with Chinese people there to be a global citizen. And because in my situation, I'm looking forward to have programs or institutions that support to implement the idea that I have here, because it's not so easy to introduce media information literacy courses at Japanese university context. And as an English teacher, I have an assigned textbook, so it's not so easy to introduce this idea of using social media or network to teach in media information literacy courses. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution. We have now Mary-Jean from Botswana. Mary-Jean, we have a video?
Video?
Yeah, it's the transmission of video.
Okay.
We have? Right.
This one, yes?
Yes.
Excellencies, distinguished attendees, fellow panelists, conference organizers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to thank UNESCO and the conference organizers for their invitation to speak at this year's MIL Feature Conference in this plenary session titled Cultural and Linguistic Barriers to Communication, Using MIL to Bridge Cultural Industries with Grassroots City Life. While I could not be physically present with you on this day, thanks to 21st century technology, I am able to communicate some of my research and ideas with you all. And I hope to use the same technology to connect with you all live during the Q&A session to hear some of your questions and comments. We're here for what has been termed Global Media and Information Literacy Week. So, what exactly is global media and information literacy? To borrow UNESCO's description of media and information literacy, it, begin quote, includes a set of competencies to search, critically evaluate, use, and contribute information and media content wisely, the ability to engage with media and ICTs to promote equality, free expression, intercultural or interreligious dialogue, peace, etc." End quote. A few things jump out from this description. On the one hand, global equates universality. On the other hand, information and expression equates linguistic communication. And finally, intercultural and interreligious denotes uninhibited dialogue. In an increasingly globalized and tech-savvy world, the concept of internationalism is gaining root, whereby singular and legitimized forms and methods of communication dominate the communication sphere. In an attempt to widen social interactions across geographies, this has birthed dichotomies, or in other words, a kind of dual imagination in geopolitics, where there is the center and then the margin, the global and then the local. These dichotomies, when unpacked, speak to issues of class, socioeconomic inequality, homogeneity, and others. Take this, for example. If you occupy the center of the spatial imagination, in other words, you understand English or another legitimized language, plus have access to the internet, then you have the ability to participate in the information economy, either by contributing or consuming information. However, if you're in the periphery, then you're somewhat marginal. In other words, if as a result of your upbringing and background, you speak an indigenous language that has not necessarily been internationally legitimized and do not have easy access to the internet, then the description of media and information literacy is somewhat irrelevant to you because there is a cultural and linguistic barrier in your ability to communicate and consume information, in that you can neither search, critically evaluate, nor contribute to the information landscape. And so it is argued that it is difficult to speak of breaking cultural and linguistic barriers to communication without speaking to the structures that create them and perpetuate them to a certain extent. So it is submitted that globalization and technologies, two features that have indeed provided numerous benefits to the global political economy, have also created some challenges that need to be addressed. Within the communication sphere, it has created a language hierarchy which has in turn yielded a kind of language politics, whereby some languages are deemed more important or more powerful than others, which is also further perpetuated by the economic clout.
Let's continue with the presentation. Of my colleague, Surayi Olunifesi from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. The Dr. Surayi, please, come with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
7 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Suraj Olunifesi, senior lecturer from the University of Lagos. Well, because I may not be able to go through the slides, but let me tell you what I have in mind. What I have in mind is citizens' accessibility status in an emerging new city. It's about disabled people. See, I found out that disabled people, they're neglected, they're discriminatory, and if we're talking about new city that's inclusive and is open, disabled people must be factored in. It is infrastructural based, the access to information must be conducive to accommodate this so that they can cross the cultural and linguistic barrier. For those who are deaf, those who cannot see, how do they access information, how do they see information, and that is what my slide is all about. So without wasting your time, I believe that accessibility is inclusiveness. The power of the web is its universality, accessed by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So ICT must be equalizer of abilities. Otherwise, ICT will be introducing new barrier for persons with disabilities. So we have seen that lack of ICT accessibility could become a barrier to access content, media, public service, and even the job market, which is bringing inequality to the disabled. So non-inclusiveness, we cannot achieve SDGs. You know what? Because those who are disabled, they have a large percentage in the country, in every way. And once these people are not able to factor in, what we're talking about is inequality. And I don't see how we can achieve SDGs by 2030. Now, if you look at the statistics about World Bank, you can read it later. These are estimated 25 million of the population in Nigeria are people with disabilities, probably highest in the northeast and lowest in the southwest. And then accessibility in relation to a meal city. What I'm saying here is that if a blind person can use all functions of airline kiosk just as easily as sighted person, kiosk said to be fully accessible to blind people. That's inclusiveness. Cultural integration. A person who uses a wheelchair might find the same kiosk difficult or impossible to reach, is then described as partially accessible or inaccessible to wheelchair users. If a person can read an internet content in his own language, irrespective of whatever language the document was originally written, that's multilingualism. So I'm thinking about disability must be able to factor in inclusiveness, cultural integration, and multilingualism. So accessibility is inclusiveness, is equality. So I'm saying that give disabled people a powerful tool in their ability to gain employment, increase disabled people's skills, confidence, and self-esteem, integrate disabled people socially and economically into their communities, reduce physically or functional barriers, and enlarge scope of activities available to disabled people. So what are we talking about? We are talking about a meal city that gives information and communication to technologies, and other means to enhance livability, workability, and sustainability. Meal city should be something that citizens can continually tune into. They should be interactive, you'll be adaptive, you'll be flexible. And then it should be able to use by anyone, that gets of age or ability. And then these so-called disabled people should be able to use IT by all means. And should we concern about the global trends? The global trends is that technology is going at a very high rate. As you can see the statistics, I don't have time to read it. And then, so as smart city as able today, you can see from indications, even despite all the noise about smart city, less than little people having access to technology. Smart cities are failing persons with disabilities, according to 60% of global experts, because technology is not factoring disabled people into the equation. Now you can see the barriers in smart cities, lack of awareness, lack of policy, lack of leadership. I don't have time to emphasize all this. Now the issue is this: accessibility barriers limit the e-participations of persons with disabilities. For instance, a television program or emergency announcement may not be signed or captioned for a deaf person. A website or government data may not be accessible to a screen reader user. A bank ATM may be too high for a person in a wheelchair to operate its keyboard. A mobile phone may not offer alternative user interface for persons with dexterity issues, low vision, or cognitive challenges. A computer program may not allow use of alternative input or output devices for persons with motor impairment. And you see, accessibility is equal to cultural and communication issues. The issue of accessibility is a cultural practice. For the questions I would love to ask here is, how do I know cultural practice that? How do we design a mobile money service for people in rural Nigeria who've never had a bank account? How do we test ability of a mobile phones for users in rural Lagos who never had an address, much less an analog address? How do we find right balance designing accessible digital technology and this for local communities in local areas? So you see, and Nigeria with over 350 diverse culture and languages, how do we have internet content that everybody can read irrespective of their languages? So can mail accessible technology bridge the gap? Yes, it can, by providing specialized software, sign language translations, widget or text reading software, specialized vocational training to perform function within ability, specialized keyboard, braille printers, conversation of language, of local language, to really, thank you so much for encouraging me. Touch screen. Okay, I do have time. Okay, thank you so much. I want to put the time actually. Touch screens, customer workplace setup to fit a wheelchair. You see, I'm so passionate about disabled because if you don't have them inside, we are just talking about a meal city that is not inclusive. And that's no we are going to have what they call society, open society. So what is accessible technology? So how accessible it is? If you go by Article 3, General Principle, Article 9, so it says any enable person with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life. Ensure to persons with disability access on an equal basis with others to the physical environment, to transportation, to information and communication technology, including information and communication technology and systems. So usable by anyone, regardless of age or ability, that is accessible technology. Make it easier to see, hear, and use all ICT devices, and then personalized experience to meet all unique needs and preferences. So accessibility is universality. So how do we design product environment to be used by all people? The design for women diversity, social inclusion, and equality. The first and only wide definition is that disabled rights movement. There must be. The second is that it must have ICT must be accessible to all. I'm sorry, I'm rushing. So ICT which contribute to improving persons with disabilities access to social and economic activity. These are the issues. The website, mobile device and devices, TV set, radio, how do they say people, irrespective whether they are blind or deaf or harmed, how do they have access to information and media? So what are the missing solutions around up right now? People with disability, other people, citizen engagement, able to all, back-end functions. So this is it. Accessibility features for the blind and people with low vision, challenge, cannot see screen, navigate website, use touch screens, keyboard, read because they are blind or they are lame. Solution, screen magnifiers, you can see it, screen readers for computers and mobile phones, gestures-based screen readers for touch screens and phone, tactile markers, tactile audience feedback, front side, text-to-speech functionality. If you talk about for deaf and hard of hearing, challenge cannot hear callers, automated electronic message, access messaging services, where solution is that volume adjustment and speakers, relay services, video relay services, SMS, visual or formatting alert, call logs, all the stuff. Accessibility features for limited mobility, those who cannot move very well, challenge, cannot use limbs, flex fingers, press or navigate buttons on a phone or a mouse or a computer. Solution, we have voice recognition to activate voice command for computer and phone, auto test, anti-shape apps, adapted keyboards and mice, alternative input in device, and so finish now. Accessibility feature for cognitive disabilities, challenge, difficulties focusing on ICT tasks like reading and typing, where solution, change font size and color, built-in screen reader for on-screen tests and some key event, keyboard adjustment to simplify typing, reduce on-screen command device with voices, as your device speaks, interact with your computer. Accessible, those for voting. This is the way smart city or a mill city can build accessible technology for people to be able to vote. And then I'll talk about the public access requirement, all this. I don't have time to go through all this. But these are movements in Nigeria talking about people who have bodies, NGOs, who are talking about laws, disability law being passed in Nigeria. And I'll tell you that, closing remark, people with disability are also people with extraordinary talent, I must tell you. Yet, they are too often forgotten. When people with disabilities are denied opportunities, they are more likely to fall into poverty, and people living in conditions of poverty are more likely to develop disabilities. As long as society excludes those with disabilities, they will not reach their full potential, and the poor in particular will be denied opportunities that they may deserve. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for your contribution. We have now the work of Juliane von Reper-Bismarck, founder and CEO of Lie Detectors. You have the word.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here early in the morning. I'm going to have very little time to tell you about our project because I actually prepared twice the content that I have time for, so bear with me. So my name is Juliane von Reper-Bismarck. I run a news literacy project called Lie Detectors. We deploy journalists to go into classrooms and start a conversation with children aged 10 to 15 about disinformation and about media bias. We are really focusing primarily on what journalism can do to eradicate disinformation. And this is a very friendly audience, but quite often when you're in an audience of media literacy people, a lot of people will say, what business do journalists have talking about media literacy? Journalists should just do journalism. But actually what we're talking about is breaking down some of these silos that exist to actually create a difference. So we start with a fairly worst case scenario assumption. We start with the assumption that we all know about disinformation. Well, probably everybody in this room knows about disinformation. I'm sure you've all heard the term fake news and all of these things. But what to do about it is not entirely evident. In Brussels, in particular, people are talking an awful lot about fact-checking. Fact-checking, no doubt, is extremely important. And as you know, Facebook has taken down 1.3 billion fake pages. Twitter keeps eradicating hate speech from its posts. But none of this, if you think about how disinformation is going underground and circulating increasingly on WhatsApp, on Snapchat, on Instagram. When you think about that, then how can the fact checkers actually catch it when text circulates in pixel form, in JPEG form, and is increasingly cleverly spliced with fact so that it is hard to recognize and plays on confirmation bias, extremely difficult to root out. We've also seen a lot of the emotional triggers being used, you know, hate and fear triggers being used, even through the emoticons that we see on social media. Once that kind of emotion is awakened, it's extremely difficult to argue it away. The other thing we ask ourselves is, what if this kind of thing is circulating, not just at election time? We hear about the Macron leaks in France, we worry about the European elections in Brussels, you know, we think about the midterm elections in the United States, but what about if disinformation is actually happening every day, drip by drip, eroding our trust in facts and actually shaping our worldview in a way that's very difficult to undo? And what if this is actually reaching audiences that are much younger than we thought? Ofcom, the British Education Communications Authority, recently said that between children aged 8 to 11, 39% have smartphones. This is obviously talking about a European context. And among 12 to 15%, that figure goes up to 83%. So very young children are accessing information more and more. And what if parents and teachers are extremely unaware of this, or if they are aware of it, they don't quite know what to do about it because the generational gap is so extreme. So this is where we come in. And what we do is extremely simple. We break down a few barriers and we ruffle some feathers in the process. We select and train journalists from accredited news organizations and accredited journalism schools. We train them up with a script that's been tested with hundreds of children and their teachers and a bunch of psychologists. And then we send them into classrooms to deliver very short, pinprick, interactive and memorable, above all, 90-minute sessions. And during those sessions, the journalists talk about two things with the children. First of all, they talk to them about disinformation. What is it? What do you call it? Why is it there? Why should we care? And what can we do about it? And secondly, and I think this is probably even more important, and it's a little more subtle, and it's the reason why we work with journalists and not just with coaches, and that is we send journalists into classrooms because we really want to get the kids to understand how journalism works. We really want to build trust in professional and ethical journalism, which is on the wane, as we know, unfortunately. And we want children, through the interactive games that we do with them, to really physically experience how easy it is to present, with the very best intentions, to present a truth that is incomplete. Because actually, what we want journalists to do is, for once, to step away from behind their screens and talk to people and say, you know what, presenting the truth is a really difficult thing, and we too get it wrong sometimes. And it's only that way that children understand the very, very important difference between a lie that's been put out there in order to manipulate and distort, and journalism, which might have its flaws and might have its problems, but is in fact put out there with the intention to inform. Let me have a look. How much time do I have left?
3 minutes.
3? Oh my goodness. Okay, so what we find, obviously, is that people really love this. Like, the effect is really amazing. Once we're in the classroom, the kids love it. They totally get that an adult is coming into the classroom to talk to them about subject matters that are really important, that a journalist has taken time. The teachers like it because they actually learn stuff. First, they like it because we come in, we ask for no preparation on their side, and they think they're going to have a coffee break. But then they like it because they actually see, oh God, look, this is actually a relevant subject. This is something that I can talk to the kids about. This is not something that's entirely scary. This is something that fits into my English lesson, into my politics lesson, my ethics lesson, whatever it might be. And the journalists, obviously, and I'm a journalist myself, so I can say this, the journalists love this because give a journalist a chance to talk about themselves, and they absolutely are in heaven. No, that's a joke. We make sure that it's very interactive. And one of the main things we do, and I think this is where media literacy comes in and this whole bridging linguistic barriers and everything, on a generational and in the digital realm, what we do is we really try and tease out of the children, particularly the young children, their own vocabulary about what they're seeing. We do not come with big words like, this is fake news, this is propaganda, this is manipulation. We actually ask them to come up with their own words for it, and especially the young kids come up with very interesting words. They don't say these words. They say things like, it's revenge myths, or it's cyberbullying myths, because they all know how they can manipulate You know, if Felipe is my friend today, I will put a beautiful photo of him onto Snapchat. If he's my frenemy tomorrow, I'll put an ugly one. That's not possible. But nonetheless, I'll put a different photo of him online, and the children understand how they, you know, the power of the digital universe to manipulate perceptions. Also, they understand clickbait perfectly well because they're all on YouTube. So by harnessing their innate understanding that they have, what we're trying to do is raise it and then redirect it from their digital playground to the world of information. And once we've got that going, we're winning. I think I'm out of time. I had a beautiful video to show you. It's such a pity. Never mind. No, I'm not going to show you that. Very finally, but for this community, one of the really big things we've noticed, one of the big things we've noticed that 100% of teachers, after we've come into the classroom, even the ones who say, thank God you're here, ignore me, I've got papers to mark, who don't really want to listen, afterwards come up and request more information. And what we're doing at the moment, the other bridge we're building, is that we're working with the media literacy expertise that's already out there from UNESCO, from Milclicks, from the OECD, from First Draft, you name it, there's brilliant material out there, and we're trying to make it very accessible to the teachers so that the conversations that we start, for which we only have 90 minutes, and that's not a very long time, creates the kind of question marks that creates a sustainable conversation that continues after we leave the classroom. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Thank you for your contribution. Now, let's see again the video of Mary Jane Nieya from Botswana, because the transmission was interrupted.
Should I start it over from the start? Should I?
Excellencies, distinguished attendees, fellow panelists, language politics, enriched by the economic clout.
It turned off.
Excellencies, which is also further perpetuated by the economic clout.
It just stops here. Yeah. It just stops and doesn't go further.
Wait for a minute, because we have technical problems here.
Excellencies, distinguished global politically. Excellencies, distinguished attendees, fellow to age within quote, begin quote, include.
It's an 8-minute video, but it stopped.
This file in cloud or something in your email. I think it's not full, not full downloaded or something.
Maybe you go ahead with the Q&A first, and let's see if we can get this working. You interact with the audience now.
But right now, it's not better. Just a minute. Open the questions about the works. Question, please. Please. Please.
My question was for Ms. Suwada from Japan about her presentation. And my question was, why was your focus on Chinese students, even though the Olympics, the event is going to be open to everybody? It's a global event and you're going to have visitors from all over the world. So, you know, I really enjoyed the presentation, but I just wanted to know why the focus was on the Chinese per se.
Chinese is a major ethnic group in Japan. Tokyo Olympic has nothing to do with, it has something to do with Tokyo city to be global, but I didn't think about much.
Okay, so you were focusing on the Chinese, not per se the event.
No.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please. Microphone for him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Am I allowed to ask 2 questions?
Right.
Okay, for 2 different representatives.
For?
Okay, first also for Mrs. Sawada.
For my presentation.
No, Mrs. Sawada.
Okay.
sorry. So my question is, why you focus on English and not on Japanese, especially for Chinese students who are living for a long time in Japan? I mean, in my opinion, they should learn Japanese. If there is, and also if there is such program that is organized by the government.
Yes, it's right that it's good for them to learn Japanese in Japanese language context, but from what I understood with the literature in literacy, we learn from the English literature. So the tradition of media information literacy education in Japan is much embedded in English education. So I think there are other Japanese professors here who have introduced their program in different contexts. So maybe they can help in Japanese media context, in Japanese media, the analysis Japanese media context.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, answer your question.
Yeah, my second question to our friend from Nigeria. Please, I would like to ask you, since English is the official language in Nigeria, is there any internet content in, for example, Yoruba, Igbo, or Hausa?
Okay, well, I think that's where we are coming from. Now, we want to have internet content that can address all those languages. So, like I told you, those 3 you mentioned, Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo,
Major ones.
These are the major ones. We have other 350 other dialects, and these people also, they are very many. So the challenge now is how do you have internet content in those languages so that everybody can have access to information. You know, we can cross the linguistic and cultural barriers, and they can understand whatever information is on the internet. Because as I see right now, most of those people does not even know what is happening on the internet, cannot read it, cannot understand it, and from the concept of Mill City, this does not bring about inclusiveness and universality we're talking about. So we are working towards that. There's a professor actually who is working on keyboard, and the keyboard can translate whatever you are writing to Yoruba language. That is being done. And Google, I think, is doing something on Igbo and Yoruba, but we want more of other dialects to come in.
But for example, at this present time, for example, if I'm a Yoruba speaker, do I have access to, I don't know, news in Yoruba or some websites in Yoruba? Or Hausa and Igbo?
That is good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there are TV online that's Yoruba, Hausa, but when it comes to content, written content, we don't have it yet. I think that's a challenge.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's see the video now.
Most international body, the United Nations, has 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, English, Spanish, French, and Russian. With this in mind, the following questions then come to the fore. Firstly, to what extent does having 6 official languages in a global body alleviate the burden on those who do not understand English and also do not understand the other 5? Secondly, how are the languages determined to be official languages of the global body? 5 of the 6 became official languages of the UN in 1946, right after World War II, when global power dynamics were of course different than they are today, whereas Arabic became an official language of the UN in 1973. The language issue becomes political, even if it is not intended to be so. Numerous other fields hinge on language and culture. It is not only the challenge of media and information literacy. It is a necessary conversation in commerce and business, diplomacy and governance, as well as other fields. Bringing the conversation home to what we are here for this week, on how then can media and information literacy bridge cultural and linguistic barriers. There should be a recognition that in the attempt to create platforms for wider engagement, there is the unintended effect of duality, where some languages or cultures take center stage and others the periphery, almost in hegemonic fashion. This means that global patterns bend towards the languages and/or cultures that have soft power, thereby causing all debates and prescribed solutions to contemporary challenges of things such as misinformation, access to information, to be dominated by discourses that pertain to some and exclude others. Therefore, the conversation on media and information literacy should recognize that already there is a challenge within the challenge. When we talk about providing learning resources, in what languages are these resources in? Are they in the 6 legitimized languages? Well, what about the communities that do not understand those 6 languages? How are the resources provided? Are they provided online? How about those who have no access to the internet? What if tools are provided in print? How about those who cannot read? Are such people already left behind in the approaches to finding solutions for media and information literacy? It is submitted that the starting point to bridging cultural and linguistic barriers to communication is, firstly, to meet diverse sets of people and their needs where they already are. And secondly, and most importantly, to recognize that there is no cultural or linguistic homogeneity, even though global patterns appear to sometimes suggest that. And thus, the discussion ought to move to one that accommodates the languages, cultures, and experiences that have inadvertently been placed on the margins of the dual landscape. 3 key ways to bridge the cultural and linguistic divide that have been identified are: 1. By supporting projects including cultural industries that have sought to dismantle the illusions of homogeneity, which include projects of translating works, including those relating to Mill, into local indigenous languages to make such material more widely available. I recognize that already this poses additional issues. 2. Challenging the gatekeepers, such as publishers, to support those who include authors who have tasked themselves with operating and writing in local indigenous languages. And 3. To constantly challenge the status quo, to think of the world, globalization, and global patterns outside binary dimensions. I close with this. As we individually and collectively chart towards Agenda 2030, our approach to bridging barriers pertaining to cultural and linguistic aspects should be inclusive and seek to ensure wide public access to information. Sustainable Development Goal 1610. Media and information literacy is also a project to leave no one behind, including those at the grassroots and in the periphery. Thank you.
More questions? Please.
So much, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to comment on the video that was just shown, as I'm here representing UNESCO and thus the UN. Though we have 6 official languages, we do pay attention to other languages in the world. UNESCO, we promote multilingualism in cyberspace. There are a number of initiatives that we support to protect other languages. For example, there's the UNESCO Atlas for the world's languages in danger. I encourage persons to go on the website and see that. We're doing a lot of extensive work on linguistic diversity and multilingualism on the internet, working with persons in indigenous community to develop software in their own languages. Thirdly, there's the International Mother Language Day, which is in May 2018, where we're promoting languages across the world. So there's a lot of other work that we're doing to ensure and to motivate and to support and to sustain multilingualism. And while I have the mic, just 2 questions to the moderator for your presentation, your research. Could you tell us what aspect or what competencies of male were featured in your research? What competences, what aspect of male were featured in your research? And then to the presenter from Nigeria, I'm not sure if what you presented was media and information literacy. Maybe you can convince me. It sounds like ICTs for persons with disability. Of course, technology is a part of male, and learning to use technology is a part of male. But if you could say a little bit more about male competencies in relation to people with disabilities.
Thank you for your question. It's a very interesting question and very important question. Two competences are the principal for me for the male approach and the approach of CBC, Cultural Barriers to Communication, or model of 20 cultural barriers to communication are. There are critical thinking and creativity thinking. Two phases of the same problem, the same research. In my opinion, most research prioritizing critical thinking and another just creativity thinking. For me, it's very important 2 phases. Okay? My answer? Okay? Thank you. But, any question, please?
Yes.
Please.
He asked me a question I have to answer.
Please.
Okay, well, for male, my presentation, how it addressed male is in 3 ways. The issue of multilingualism, because I said these disabled peoples, they are from different tribes, different cultures, and then some of them cannot speak, actually. Some of them are deaf, and they are dumb. So how do male, using ICT, to enable them to be able to see, to read content that they cannot see? How does it help them to also be able to read their own languages on the net? And since they don't have, and some of them are handicapped, they don't have hands, how do we enable them to be able to press the keyboard and internet so that they can be able to read those information? That is the aspect of multilingualism. Then the cultural aspect of it is that this cultural, the disabled people are culturally backward. It's so people trying to malign them, that they don't want to associate with them. So how do we bring them in? How does you use mail to bring them in such a way that they'll be acceptable and we can give them inclusiveness and they can be able to access information, content information? Because once somebody is blind or is lame or does not have limb, so to access information is difficult. To be able to speak to other people is difficult. It doesn't see. To be able to read is difficult. It cannot press. So those things are difficult. So for male angle, which is about media and information literacy, and if you look at my first slide, second slide, so that I said that for them to be able to access, if disabled are not able to access information on the net or TV or radio or cannot vote, e-participation, then we are not having inclusive society. So male is coming in to enable using technology. Male also include technology. How does it bring them to overcome that cultural barrier? How does it help them to have to participate when it comes to voting? How does it help them to have access to information? How do they have access to media despite their disabilities? That is where, and how can they cross that cultural barrier and linguistic deficiency? That is where male comes in. I'm not sure whether you're convinced.
One more question here.
just a comment. You have to have physical access before you can have intellectual access, right? So the question, though, is to you, sir, and that is one of the barriers is autocratic communication. So how do you implement MIL for autocrats who do not want people to be critical thinkers, since autocrats often have power?
But this model is a new model. We test this model in many populations. In Cuba, we have our research are in 11 countries. This is the record in Brazil and Cuba. But this is a test, pilot test. In another research, we have a new mains, a new results, and this the initial research. But any question? Please.
Mary Jane's also connected, so if the audience have any questions, they can.
Okay. Any question for Mary Jane? She's connected now. Well, please.
Well, Mary Jane, it's nice to have you online. And let me just commend you for a very nice presentation. Though you are not physically present, but your speech is self-explanatory. And I think for me, I'm convinced of what you are saying. And I love your recommendations. So thank you so much.
More questions? Please.
Hello, Meijin. Thank you very much. So, impressive presentation. So, I'd like make a very short comment. So, I feel how can I say now? Language politics is a very important issue, I think, to treat with the male, because there is a language barrier here. So for me, I am Japanese, and my first language is Japanese, and English is second language. I can speak English because I have a good education, but many of Japanese people have not enough education to speak English and to express his or her thought. So we try to empower such a kind of people with mail. So I think that's a very good point, I think. Thank you very much. Just a short comment.
Okay, respond.
Language policy, we can speak in Japanese between us. So yeah, thank you for your comments. Yeah, and language policy is important. Yeah, so I'm actually teaching to low beginners in Japan, English. So it's very difficult for me to teach them like English and media information literacy. Yes.
In this session, we discuss about cultural barriers to communication, linguistic barriers to communication. There are very important things, topics, because with this diagnosis and implementation with strategies, creativity strategies for the change this situation, we have a new world, a new cities, smart cities, and new citizens too. We have highlights and insights about cultural barriers to communication with immigrants, with problem to teach and learn English language in Japan, audiovisual communication too, and barriers to accessibility, unlike detectors. But in my opinion, was a very interesting session, and the highlights and the conclusion of this session is new research, new programs of MEL, and new instruments of MEL. My challenge and our challenge is this. Thank you so much for everybody.